Okay, so yeah, thanks for having me. So my name's Zoe Cadwell. I'm a lecturer in Criminology and Forensic Studies at the University of Portsmouth. This presentation is focused on a module that I coordinate at level 7, so at master's level. So I've just got a really brief background about our master's flexible framework. So yeah, we offer a flexible framework called the MSc in Criminal Justice. Students choose a core pathway or a joint pathway and this dictates their exit award. So, for example, a student might choose a joint pathway in forensic crime science and forensic investigation, or they might just choose a straight forensic investigation pathway, but the framework itself is very expansive and very wide. Students on all of the courses on the framework take core modules in research methods and ethics. They do a dissertation as you'd expect, and then they have a core module for their pathway or pathways. So the module I'm focusing on today is called Forensic Investigation and is the core module for the Forensic Investigation pathway, funnily enough. So students who choose this pathway can then choose optional modules like all the students on the framework. And the modules are available from across the framework. So I might have forensic investigation students that choose a psychology module or a criminal justice module, but a lot of them choose our optional forensic modules as well, which include applied forensic science and aquatic forensic investigation. But before they get to that point, they must complete this forensic investigation core module. So it's one of the modules I coordinate here at Portsmouth. It's the only one that I coordinate as part of the MSc framework at the moment. I was asked to take the module over this summer just gone to start in October last month. So I didn't have much time to really think about what I wanted to do with it. And I just wanted to contextualise the fact that it meant that all of the module paperwork was in. So I had the timetable forms had been put in. I couldn't change any structure of the module at this point. So I thought that the easiest way to probably explain the module really briefly is to just show you the learning outcomes. So as you would expect from a forensic investigation module, there are the core elements of ensuring that students know how to assess evidence in the scene, recover it, and interpret the value of that evidence. But this module also is underpinned by a lot of critical thinking, more widely about the investigation. So thinking in terms of where the forensic investigation sits in a wider investigation, and for students to come out of this module understanding how important decision making is at the scene in context of not just the forensic response but the wider investigation as well. So there's a lot of expectation, or I wanted to promote even more critical thinking on that level, and having students to meet these learning outcomes of how to defend and justify these decisions. So that's the kind of brief outline of the module by using the learning outcomes there. So this is the structure as I have run with it this year. Some of this I have managed to kind of insert by shifting some things around, which includes the VR practicals, which I'll discuss shortly. But predominantly the structure was set, as I said, because I took it on only a few months ago. So there's 7 3-hour practical classes, and this is where I have this investigative complex scenario that I wanted to bring into the module. They also do a 4-hour immersive investigation using Hydra. I don't know if anybody is aware of Hydra or has used it, been trained with it or used it with their students, but it's an immersive platform where the students come to the session and they are split into syndicates and they go off into syndicate rooms, and within their rooms they have tablets in their groups and they have the large screen, and as they're in their room they are fed actions and updates and information in real time for an investigation, and they need to respond to the information that's fed into their syndicate room, and also complete objectives that are set as part of those actions. And they do this by responding through interactive logs which detail their rationales and their decisions. So it's very much a decision-making immersive experience. actually my students just did this on Monday, and it was just fantastic. So it's really, really good for those real-time thinking about decisions. How do those decisions impact a wider investigation, which is really, really important to this module. Currently, there's only 2 hours of lectures on the module, 1 hour at the beginning, 1 hour at the end, and then there's some tutorials. I was really really enjoyed Rachel's beginning to this session today, introduction, because she talked about, you know, what we went through last year and what we've learned from last year. And we are 100% face-to-face here at Portsmouth. We've started back this academic year with no online delivery at all. But I very much keeping a lot of the lessons learned from blended learning and using the VLE more effectively to support the students' learning. So whilst we are face-to-face, I'm very much developed a VLE that kind of keeps that tone of blended learning to support the students when they're not in the classroom. So that's kind of the structure of the module. So this presentation, again, in terms of what Rachel was saying at the beginning about what she perceives some of the ethos of this year's remote forensics to be, is about people bringing challenges. So this is sort of what my presentation is this challenge that I identified in needing to design and develop this module this term. And so my challenge really was, first of all, when I took the module on, I was very conscious that colleagues had said that this could be a mixed experience group. Previously, last year, colleagues who worked on the module have said that they had a very, very high number of students who had undertaken some level of forensic investigation at undergraduate level. But because there's no admission criteria that means that they have to have that experience, there is the chance that there will be students on the module who don't have any forensic investigation background to their previous studies. So from the outset, I was really conscious that I wanted to make sure I was stretching and challenging all students, whilst thinking very clearly about the benchmarks of what we need to be providing in terms of learning and teaching at level 7, and also making sure those learning outcomes are met by all students, no matter what experience they've got when they come to join the module. Of course, those students that have got undergraduate forensic investigation experience, we need to maintain their interest, their enthusiasm, so ensuring that they don't feel that they're repeating things that they've done previously. But at the same time, making sure those that haven't got that experience don't feel overwhelmed and lost in a level 7 module where they have no background previous study. And then another challenge that I thought I should probably consider comes from previous experience of teaching crime scene modules, and that's where we have these crime scene spaces, and we're very lucky when we have these spaces to teach students, but some students can find it challenging when they have real familiarity with the teaching space. And they find it difficult sometimes to confront a new scenario in a space that they've been going into each week. And I've had instances perhaps where students are sort of sometimes walking into a scene and they've seen that scene so many times before, they're simply just going, well, that blood wasn't on the carpet last week, so that must have something to do with this scene, rather than engage in the thought processes that we'd like to see. And I was conscious from colleagues that a number of our level 6 undergraduates last year were expressing interest in coming onto the forensic investigation pathway at master's level. So I was also thinking that I may well have a significant number of students that were familiar with the teaching spaces. So I was thinking about new and unique scenarios. I looked really carefully at what students had done here at undergraduate level. Of course, I'm always going to elevate the teaching up and the learning up to that level 7, but I wanted to make sure it was very different to anything they might have done before. And so I needed to plan for these challenges without having a clue what my actual cohort demographic was. So it turned out I have now, so I'd just like to point out I'm only in week 5 of the module, so I'm still getting feedback and seeing how this is going, but I have 26 students registered on the module, and surprisingly this year we have less numbers of experienced students than we did last year. So only 42% of the cohort have previously studied any type of forensic investigation at undergraduate. But out of those ones that have, those 42%, all of them studied here at Portsmouth except one. Some of them are taking a year or two out, but all of them are our undergraduates moving up to level 7 except for one. So there's less experience of forensic investigation in the group than anticipated. And the other subjects that the students have studied at undergraduate level include biomedical sciences, law, and other social sciences like criminology, sociology, and psychology. So what have I done? So I set up this year a peer review buddies group, a peer review buddy and group discussion system. So I'm trying to help the students to elevate their learning through working in pairs and small groups. So each student is paired with another colleague, but they will be paired with, so if they have experience of forensic investigation, they'll be paired with a student that doesn't. This is not for the student who has experience to be teaching the student that doesn't. It's to bring wider kind of viewpoints and approaches to the problems that they need to solve, and encouraging them to be collaborative in problem solving. So they don't work together at the scene. Where possible, the students are working on their own in the scenes. But if they are in pairs, they're not in pairs with their buddy. And the reason being is that when they have their discussions afterwards, which they're encouraged to do after every session, they're actually reflecting on each other's approach to the problem that they were set that week. So they're already being exposed to the fact that there's no real checklist for this. There's different approaches to solving the same problem, and reflecting on how other people approach those problems can be a really good learning experience. And they also undertake peer review of each other's crime scene notes, photographs, plans, strategies, and the decisions that they've made. They're encouraged to record these reflections and these discussions in reflective diaries, so that they can think more widely about, they're not just niche thinking about what they did and how they did it, they're now considering somebody else's approach. And what's actually happened with this is that they've really enjoyed it, and they've actually developed wider peer review groups that they now meet up and they have these reflective discussions in a wider group rather than just in their pairs. So they've developed their own system for this as well. But in order to support them from a tutor point of view, they have Padlets that they can add questions or discussion points to, that we can pick up in the next session and lead a group discussion on and iron out any of those grey areas that they've encountered. So that's the buddy system. So the outcomes of this peer review system, the feedback that I'm getting really supports findings in the literature. So there's some quotes down there from Cadwell et al. That show that students working in teams improves their motivation, and this collaborative working learning helps them develop their critical thinking, etc. And the feedback we're getting is that they really feel that they're having a deeper learning experience because they're explaining things to their peers, they're reviewing the work of their peers, and they're discussing the thoughts and processes with their peers. And this is really coming back really positively. As well as this, they've undertaken this reflective practice, and it's enabling them to identify and fill gaps in their knowledge. This is then helped by the peer review discussion, because another student might have a really good troubleshooting idea for that issue that the students encountered. But if not, it identifies gaps for them to then use their independent learning, which we expect at level 7, to go off and fill those gaps. And also this mixed experience has just turned out to be fantastic. So we're seeing that students can appreciate that everybody's experience is valid. So for one really nice example is one of the law graduates has brought a really crucial experience of understanding bias in court to a number of the discussions, and it's enabled students who, even the ones who studied forensics before, to see how important the critical thinking and decision making at the scene is, and how that can impact issues at court, and to think about things like bias. So the validity of all of the different experiences within the group are really coming out in these peer review discussions. Just a quick one on something that I've added this year. Credit to my colleague Selena Robinson, who has helped me with developing virtual reality scenes. Sort of going along the lines of the Main and Green paper from last year, we wanted to see how students really gauge innovative technology and how they create opinions and ideas about how it can be used in learning, in training, in teaching. So we set them this scene in the very first week. And we gauge their opinion on it, and we're going to set them a scene in the very last week, and we're going to look at how they reflect on the different methods of learning, including the innovative technology as we work through the module. So that's been really interesting. So the main thing I wanted to talk about just lastly is the complex major scenario. So I was really keen that this was a complex major scenario because it's a level 7 module. So what I wanted to do was really, I thought long and hard, and I read literature, and I was like, right, what I want to do is a scenario-based module. So previously the module has been split up into the sort of evidence types, and so students have done different scenes. But I really wanted to draw on that understanding of the investigative nature of the module as I see it. So instead of it being broken up into different scenes, they now have one scenario that stretches across the module. So it's the same investigation throughout, but what happens is it develops into associated scenes. So it's not the same scene, but it's the same investigation. And this means they're going to utilise different learning spaces, and they're going to layer their learning experience. So they will end up with linked scenes, enabling them to develop skills in scene management, coordination, consideration of contamination on a complex level, but without it being piecemeal. It's this one long investigation, so it builds their knowledge and their experience up. And this hopefully fits in with the QAA benchmarks for what we expect a master's degree students to achieve. So lastly then, the outcomes of this have been that I've worked on utilising various pedagogies such as observation, problem and case-based learning to try and develop this complexity and interdisciplinary thinking. It's showing clear signs of supporting those students that have less experience, because they really appreciate having the ability to retain the familiarity with the scene, the investigation. So they're not being told a whole new investigation kind of thing every week. They are able to build those layers up across the same investigation. So this has developed investigative practice for all of the students, their critical thinking and that wider impact decision making. It also supports those that are aware of the teaching spaces, because they are getting variations on those teaching spaces, and they're getting different clear scenario information, but it's enabling them to take a step back and have a bit of a think about what they're being presented with. And underneath all of this, of course, all of this thinking, they are continuing the development of those practical skills in evidence recovery. Yeah, I basically would appreciate any suggestions from anybody who's experienced this at level 7 or any level at all with these mixed experience groups, how you've maybe overcome these challenges, because I am going to now look at redeveloping the module. I'm going to restructure it and add some lectures at certain points. I'll be utilising feedback when I get it. I will be retaining the peer review system, but adding some more formative tutorials. And retaining the immersive learning via Hydra, because this has really come at a really important point in the module where they're developing these key decision-making skills. So yeah, sorry, that was a couple of minutes too long, but I hopefully got the point. Thank you for listening.
Zoe, that was absolutely fantastic. The chat has gone crazy, saying how amazing it was. We also think that you should produce this as a publication. So I realise that might be more work on your plate, but it's just amazing. So I'll start with some of the questions in the chat. Are you using outdoor spaces on and off campus for your scenarios?
Yeah, so at the moment, of course, like I said, I mean, this is not an excuse, but of course I didn't have much time for my planning, but I have got indoor spaces. I haven't, the reason I've been a bit vague about the scenarios, because I'm only in week 5, and I don't want, if any of the students saw this or were here.
Absolutely.
But it's based on a real case as well, and so the scenario is an indoor space initially, and the associated scenes are then we're going to use outside spaces that we have.
That's amazing. And following on from that, regarding the crime scene spaces that you have, one of the questions is, are you allowed to splash blood around and trash them up a bit as well?
Yeah, let's just say the first scene they've had is meant to be in a derelict warehouse where someone was held prisoner, false imprisonment and tortured, and we've been able to recreate that. So yeah.
Wow, that's really impressive. And one question about the Padlet.
Yeah.
Are you using free Padlet, or does the University of Portsmouth pay for licenses for students?
We have a Padlet license, and it's a godsend because I've found I've done some pedagogy sort of sessions for colleagues um, where I'm really into Padlets basically, and I found lots and lots of ways that we can use them really effectively that people might not realise. So thankfully, this is just a very plain example of how I've been using Padlets, particularly in that blended learning that I mentioned on Moodle. So I set interactive exercises using Padlet as well to support learning, but that's only possible because we do have the license, because free Padlet you only get about 3 Padlets, I think, if you don't have a license, but it's worth having it if your uni's got it.
Regarding the VR headsets, what was the software that you were using? You had a little image of it on your slides.
Yes, so,
had little hotspots on it.
Yeah, so they're Oculus headsets, and my colleague Selena builds the scenes, and then we work on adding the hotspots to them according to what we want to get. So she's very much the tech. Obviously, I don't even know how to use Teams, so you could probably guess that I just build the scenes in. But I talked to her about what I want, and then she builds the scene, and then we think about where to put the hotspots in. But yeah, they can go around and pick stuff up, throw stuff around. I went in and tidied the scene up because there was just cushions everywhere. Yeah, so it's pretty good. They can get down and underneath furniture and look for weapons that might be hidden and things. So she's just building us a mortuary at the moment. So she's building the scene, and then I'll go in and sort of put some more input into where I want hotspots and things like that.
That's excellent. Everyone thinks that this is such a cross-disciplinary approach. It's having the complex linked scenarios and scenes is it's superb what you're doing for level 7. I'm just having a look. Yeah, everyone's saying amazing, innovative approach. Should be published. Thanks for sharing. I'm just seeing if there's any more really good ideas.